the spec CPU 2000 benchmark 13 times on 8 identical PCs for a total of 108 runs. So what's in red is our maximum overhead, that's 3.69%. And our minimum overhead is minus 0.42%. However, there's also some memory overhead associated with our memory allocator. So the original DL-malloc implementation has about 8 bytes of overhead per chunk. Our current overhead for every program is, well, 1 page for the guard page for the hash table. For every 16,000 chunks, we'll have a guard page for the chunk info region and an information page. Well, currently this information page is not used. I'll talk about that later when I'll tell you what's still to be done in our allocator. And per chunk, we have 20 bytes of chunk information overhead and 1 hash table entry per 8 chunks. Excuse me. So when we ran these, when we tested this memory overhead on the spec CPU 2000 benchmarks, they're generally pretty low, except in the case of 12. However, we should look at what the program's actual memory uses, which is 3 megabytes, so we've enlarged this to 5 megabytes. And 12 uses a lot of really small chunks. At one time, it will use more than 49,000 chunks, because we'll allocate 4 chunk info regions. But which brings us to the to-do for dnmalloc. We never release a chunk info region. So if there's lots of free chunk information, we'll just have a very large linked list of free chunk informations. So this is what's left to do, which I hope to do in the next few days. If we release this, we'd probably reduce the memory allocation overhead for 12 as well as the other programs I showed. There's also one function in our allocator which is pretty slow, so I'm also going to improve this in the next few days, hopefully, and this should also improve performance even more. So let's discuss related work. So Robertson and a bunch of other people designed a heap protector. This protector stores a checksum in every chunk's header and encrypts this checksum with a global read-only random value. It adds this checksum to the header when a chunk is allocated, and it checks it before it runs free. As a result, if the attacker has modified this, he won't be able to calculate his own checksum without knowing the random number, which is also the weakness of this allocator. If the random value is leaked, it could be bypassed. The allomalloc 2.8 implements a slightly modified version of Robertson's heap protector. Contra Police protects the chunk, protects the heap by placing a random value before and after the chunk. And unlike Robertson's heap protector, which modifies malloc and free, this modifies the copy functions, so like string copy, memory copy, and whatever. And it checks if the canary before matches the canary after before executing the copy function. However, if an overflow occurs that in a non-copy function, so for example in a loop, then this allocator is not effective. Again, if the canary value is leaked, the attacker could just place his own canary value on the heap, and as a result, could bypass the protection. glibc added some integrity checks in the latest version. Before unlinking a chunk, it would check if the pointers actually point to sane information. And it will also do some extra chunks in different places of the allocator. For example, before free, it will check if the pointer which is being freed is smaller than its negative size. This, because this is usually an attack vector. However, Phantasmagoria recently released a paper in which he describes 5 techniques for bypassing these integrity checks, so they're not 100%. So in conclusion, our many memory allocators ignore security issues, and as we've shown, a safer allocator is not necessarily that much slower. But we still have an important limitation in our memory allocator, is that we only protect the chunk information, not what is actually stored in the chunk. So if a function pointer would be stored on the heap, it would still be overflowable. This work is actually part of larger research which I'm doing, which is part of where we separate other important areas in memory from the normal data. So currently we're finishing up on a stack-based countermeasure in which we do the same as we did now. And this is part of my real research, which is building a more methodical approach to designing countermeasures. There's actually 3 papers associated with this talk. The first one describes all these allocators. The second one is actually the paper I submitted to CCC, which describes how we built this allocator using the more methodical approach. And the final one describes the idea for the more methodical approach. So we've got an implementation which will be available tonight on the following website together with the papers. Okay, are there any questions? Yes?
So you're designing a memory allocator which has one very large global data structure, whereas the trend in malloc implementations now is to have thread local allocation buffers. Does does your design sort of scale to the applications that require thread local allocation buffers?
I haven't tested that yet, so I'm not sure.
Because it seems that the performance measurements you made don't really seem to be relevant to modern applications which have lots of threads, and there's a lot of contention over malloc's global data structures, or the traditional malloc global data structures.
That's true. I didn't check for actual threaded applications.
Is there any plans on doing that?
Yeah, hopefully in future versions. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.